people filtering in, over the next few minutes. But in the meantime, we are going to go ahead and just get started with introductions. So although I probably know most of you who are in the audience, hopefully you're on week 3 of our Transition Institute. Welcome. For those of you that may be joining us for the first week, my name is Jackie Tolge, and I'm the coordinator of transition services for Los Angeles Unified School District. This is, like I mentioned, week 3 of our Transition Institute, and we are really excited to be bringing this series to you every week. For those of you that are in our department and have been following along, if you are unable to come at the live time, we are recording right now, and we are putting a way together for you to access the recordings. For those of you that are not LAUSD staff or not transition staff, more information to come about as to how you can access the recordings. And so with that, I will hand this over to Ann Nygren, who I will give credit where credit is due, has taken on most of the task, and I will say challenge, of putting these sessions together for us. So Ann, please go ahead and introduce everyone.
Hi everyone, I'm Ann Nygren, and welcome to the 3rd seminar within the Transition Institute today. So far we have learned about A through G and graduation requirements, due process and legally defensible ITPs, and today is job carving. So basically, what can we as transition educators do to improve our practice when it comes to finding job placements for our students? We are so fortunate to have Grit and Flow leading today's seminar. Grit and Flow guides organizations in the development of inclusion practices utilizing research. Their work with job developers and businesses aid in providing meaningful employment. Representing Grit and Flow today, we have Nicole Seward and Ivan Stanojevic. Nicole earned a bachelor's in psychology and a master's in industrial organizational psychology. She is a member of the Autistic Women's Alliance and also of the Speakers Bureau for the Asperger Autism Network. She combines her personal experiences with autism to her educational background in psychology to research and develop content, strategies, and training. Her focus is on helping organizations support people with disabilities in the workplace. And also we have Ivan. Ivan earned a bachelor's in psychology and a master's in clinical psychology. For the past decade, he has focused on being an ally to the disabled community. He has experience as a behavior therapist, a job developer, an adjunct instructor, and as a project manager for services for the disabled community. He has built and implemented several successful job preparation and job training programs, and he's also on the leadership team for the Orange County Local Partnership Agreement. On behalf of the District Office of Transition Services, we thank you both for being here today, and we thank all of you, the attendees, for joining in. Before I hand it over, it should be noted that the webinar is recorded, and if you do have questions, please use the Q&A feature, and there will be time at the end to get those answered. Timing-wise, please plan to be here until at least 2 p.m., and also in the last few minutes of the seminar, I will post a link in the chat to a quick survey asking for your feedback. So with that, I will turn it over to Nicole and Ivan.
Thank you so much for that awesome introduction, and killed it on the name. So I'm Ivan Stanojevic, and I am so excited to be here today and to be joined by Nicole. We're going to have a wonderful opportunity to be with you across the next few weeks, talking about a lot of different aspects when it comes to job developing, placements, and different things along those lines. One of the things that I really want to emphasize is that the majority of this information comes from research. Nicole is the one that loves to dive in and look up the research and make it digestible for all of us, really. Me personally, my knowledge and experience comes from doing the job of a job developer. And I know when I started off, it was basically, you're a job developer now, go do the job developing thing. And there wasn't much support, or let alone research, that I need to fall back on. So we're really, really hoping that the information here is useful to you as you job develop for the students you get to serve. So another thing, the last year has been very different, practically to the day. And I know I was working in an adult education agency at North Orange Continuing Education at the time. And I found out that next week we're going to go to distance education, an institution that's provided zero distance ed. So this was me. I was terrified. I didn't know where to start, but I knew it was important to start somewhere to continue offering our services. So with that, I really want to start off with something from my heart. I really want to thank all of you for what you do. I come from a country called Yugoslavia that went through a lot of hardships. As a kid, I went through a war, and during that time, they stopped offering education. The one thing I had as a normalcy was really gone. And I truly, truly mean this. Thank you all for showing up. Thank you so much for doing what you do, because this is something that you get to offer something to your students, this level of consistency that otherwise they wouldn't have. So now with that, the next thing that's important to Nicole and I is to really kind of know and check in who's all in the room. So I'm going to launch the first poll just to see who all is in here. So we'll take a little bit of time to give everybody an opportunity to fill this out. And I'll give you about a 5-second warning when I'm about to close this out. Oh, you guys are participating. Awesome. The classes I teach, I wish I had this level of participation. Okay, so I'm going to give it about 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let me just share the results. So there's one lonely charter staff. Thank you for championing for everybody else. We have a lot of leadership here, transitional teachers and part of a transitional team, and some sports staff. Very cool, thank you. The other thing I want to do is I want to do a quick check-in with everybody. Again, it is crazy times. It being a 1-year anniversary of going into this pandemic is very stressful. I know I've noticed it with my students. I'm sure you did as well. So I just want to do a quick check-in to just see where everybody's at. So again, if you're not having the best day, you would go with the lower numbers. If you're having a pretty good day, you can go with the higher numbers. Okay, so I'm going to close this out again in about 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, good. It looks like majority of people are having a good day. And we like doing this because it gives us a chance to all kind of remember, you know what, we might be having an awesome day, but somebody we're working with might not be. And compassion is really difficult to maintain when you're doing everything online. So thank you for being vulnerable enough to share this. Okay. Just some quick housekeeping notes. We want this to be as interactive as possible. There's about 100 people in here with us. So Nicole is going to be running the Q&A portion and answering your questions as they come in. I've asked her to definitely interrupt me if there's a big question or anything along those lines. And outside of that, please stay muted. And at the very end, if there's time, we'll definitely want to answer your questions. Nicole, am I missing anything? Okay. So here's our overall agenda. We're going to be talking about job carving, what it is, the benefits of it, how your students will benefit from it. Nicole also found this awesome case study that I've utilized in the past too, that focuses on very specific steps on how to accomplish job carving. We'll talk about some best practice tips, and then establishing employer relationships. And now just for our last poll, again, we want to make this about your needs as much as we can. These are the major topics we're going to be talking about. So overview of job carving successfully, best practices and tips, as well as establishing employer relationships. So I'm going to run the last poll and just let us know which topic you're the most interested in, so we know to spend a little bit more time on it. And again, thank you so much for modifying the polls very last minute. That is extreme flexibility, so I really appreciate that. Okay, I'm gonna give it about 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Okay, so it looks like you're mostly interested in best practices and everything else is fairly close too. So good to know. So with that, let's jump on it.
Disability only becomes a tragedy when society fails to provide the things that we need in our lives. This is a quote by Judy Heumann. She's recognized internationally as a leader in the disability community. She led the mainstreaming of disability rights into international development. She led the disability rights demonstrations in 10 US cities in 1977. They started on April 5th and they included a sit-in at the San Francisco office of the US Department of Health and Education and Welfare. The 504 sit-in ended on May 4th, 1997. It totaled 28 days, 150 people, mostly disabled people, refused to leave, and it is still today the longest sit-in at a federal building to date. One of the big things that she was pushing for was for society to understand that disability rights are human rights and that we are often disabled by our environment and its access restrictions. This is what becomes a tragedy because when the environment meets our needs, we are no longer disabled by it.
Thank you. So the overview of job carving. We're going to talk about what it is, the benefits of job carving for the employer, as well as the benefits for the student. Just a few quick disclaimers. Oh, Nicole, I believe this is your part.
Yeah, sure. So we use multiple types of language, identity first language. We realized that when referring to individuals on the autism spectrum, that there is no one term that suits all people. And in our published material and other work, we use autistic person, but we'll also use person on the autism spectrum and person on the spectrum. The same goes for disabilities. Often disabled people prefer identity first language. The term autistic person is identity first language. It reflects the belief that being autistic is a core part of who we are and our identity, and other individuals are the same. Mostly, like I said, prefer identity first language. For example, instead of saying a person who is blind, you would say blind person, deaf person, disabled person, etc. But it is important to keep in mind that individuals do have different preferences, and there are some instances when individuals use person first language to convey empowerment, that they are a person before their disability. Though this is not necessarily the more common choice, it is important to always ask an individual their language use. Do they like person first or identity first? It's always good to check. And then I think Even is going to go through the rest of the two.
Yeah. And coming from education, that one is always an interesting one because I'm so typically used to saying people first language, but things change. So the second bullet is that the information we're going to share are best practices, but you can't really just start off with best practices. It's good to try to aim towards them, build upon them. And then the other disclaimer is that a lot of what we're sharing, there's no red tape included, meaning that there's going to be different policies for your district in particular, sometimes your schools in particular, that some of these things might not work the way they are, and they'll need some sort of adjustment. But those are things for you to kind of see locally the best way to implement. Okay, so just so that we have the same definition, what is job carving? It's being able to identify unmet employer needs, creative thinking about how work can be done and how tasks can be accomplished, creating, modifying, or customizing community-based jobs. Tasks carved from several jobs can be combined into a new position. Job tasks combined into new role are tailored to the worker's strengths, interests, preferences, skills, and abilities. And this last one is one of the most important ones. It starts with this. It truly requires a person-centered approach. Now, we know the benefits of job carving. We're the ones pushing for it, but sometimes it's a little bit difficult to identify to the employer what the benefits are. So the employer gets to enjoy a low-cost option to develop and train new employees. Hiring disabled individuals benefits companies' long-term viability and profitability, as well as it enhances corporate image and demonstrates commitment to the community. One of the big things right now for many businesses is that they want to prove that they care about their community, that they're in touch with their community. This is a wonderful way to accomplish that. So here are some benefits for the student. Employment that meets their knowledge, skills, and abilities, increases their chance for future success in a workplace. They get an opportunity to work, provides increased well-being and sense of purpose. And then early work experiences contribute to increased financial success and independence. So ultimately, it's great for everyone. The student gets a job tailored to their strengths. Employer enjoys greater productivity. Workers who have a lot of extra work and tasks that they don't typically enjoy to do are freed up to work on other specialized tasks. The tasks that may have been put off can finally be done. And they're able to reassign duty from current staff to maximize organizational productivity. I've had students who go in and follow the rules to the book, that it ultimately increases the productivity of a whole department because now the student is holding them all accountable to do it, and in an extremely positive, exciting type of way. So we talked about all that. We know what the advantages are. And then I can't help but feel kind of like this. Now what? I love this image. All they want to do throughout the movie is get into the ocean, but they're in a little bag. So how do you get out of those? So this is where the research that Nicole's done really, really helps. So the step one is to start targeting students for employment. Learn their range of knowledge, their range of skills, their abilities of your candidates. Again, person-centered planning, that's where it really, really starts. Taking the time to understand your student, knowing their strengths, knowing their current weaknesses. And especially knowing these before you meet with an employer. This helps to provide them ongoing support as they're in that task. So step one, talk about even the potential of pairing a student for a job. You know, that it's a pretty good feeling when you're able to place two students in one position. This can help include, this can provide more opportunities for a lot of different students, which can be really, really helpful. Oops, sorry, went a little bit too fast. The employer might not be excited to hire a student for just a few tasks, but pairing students can help broaden the array of tasks by working together. Job share model cuts down on potential support costs for employers. Also consider the weekly time commitment for both the student and the employer. A lot of times, I know instructors and teachers want to have their student in for a lot of hours right off the bat, but it is really, really beneficial if a student can stay in that position for a longer period, maybe working less hours throughout the week. It lessens the load really for everyone doing it that way. For the employer, how much focus and energy that they have to give during the time that the student is there. The student too. I mean, whenever you start a new job, how stressful is it that first week? You know, that first week on the job, you come home and you're exhausted. And for our students, they have to go to school and do that as well. Now, trying to find the ideal job match, and it's in quotes on purpose because ideal is difficult to reach. So the career planning should really start before the job development. You know, you should involve the job seeker and all of their supports. So that can be family, that can be friends, that could be any type of other professionals in their career planning, their regional center coordinator, if they're a part of DOR, any of those different things. So try to look at students' interests, passions, skills, and abilities. And this can really help guide you to see where, they will be the most successful. The other thing that I always remind myself of, when I work with students, I try to think like, okay, what do you want to do? What type of job? I'm putting this pressure of them knowing exactly what they want. But then when I put myself in their shoes, I had no clue what I wanted to do at that age. I wanted to be a chef. Ultimately, I found out what I really like is eating, not necessarily the cooking part. So this is an awesome opportunity to find out what, typically your student enjoys when it comes to hobbies and different things like that. And then you have to do the detective work of piecing together what skills and passions do they have within those hobbies that can translate into work.
I have a quick note on that.
Sure.
Some of you may have heard of this, but this is a really good way to assess a student's interests. If they are able, the online assessment provided by ONET, the interest profiler, is a really great way to survey a number of different interests, and then they funnel them into career paths. So if you are struggling with trying to understand someone's interests or passions, that's a really good way to get a foot in the door.
ONET is a phenomenal website for all kinds of different things. If you have not checked it out before, I can't recommend it highly enough to go see it. There's also Career Coach if you have students who are looking for the next step after K through 12, if they're interested in, getting a CTE certificate at a local continuing education school or higher degrees. It does a wonderful job of keeping a lot of the information together and easy to kind of digest. It can be very overwhelming at first when you go to a lot of these different sites, but ONET and Career Coach are really, really good ones. Thank you, Nicole. So now you want to target specific businesses that fit this hypothesis. So organization is key. LAUSD is a huge, huge district. One of the things that's really, really important is being organized internally, which can be very, very difficult. Having the ability to know who's going to go to what meeting, to know who's going to go talk to what business. This is where it's really important to recognize that you're not functioning as an individual when you go to these sites. You are showing either your school or even your whole district. And a lot of these businesses might have heard or had people come visit prior to you, and it can be confusing to them why they're being talked to again by the same institution. I've lost, due to lack of communication within my own teams in the past, we would lose businesses because it looked kind of unprofessional that we kept coming and knocking at their door. So organizing internally is really important. Organizing, and what that looks like is, if you have local business networks or events or different things like that, talk and see who's going to what. Research, the different businesses that are available through your personal contacts. You can look at a lot of different annual reports, Chamber of Commerce information, and then record keeping track. One of the big pushes we've recently had was in one of my previous roles was to help streamline employment at a local grocery store. And there were several job developers on that task, and it was important for us to keep strong records. If you're going to go to a specific store, are you talking to the store manager, the front end manager, whatever positions there are? How receptive were they? Were they very open to the idea or not? And making sure that you update this information continuously as you are working with these different sites and visiting them and knowing who's going to go to what. So again, it's difficult. Like I mentioned at the beginning, you all do so much and do not get the credit that you deserve in a lot of the things that you do from the public and from so many others. But this is very time, this involves a lot of time at the front end but it benefits so much in the back end once you start utilizing systems like this of communicating. But again, I want to focus. At the beginning, I also said that we're really talking about best practices. It's okay to build up to them. So if you want to just start tracking one of these things, that's a great, great start. Okay. So you can use the following to narrow down your list when it comes to the businesses. Does the business have a variety of duties? Does that mean that there's a lot of potential for additional experiences for your students? Does the business have manual operations? So are they doing any of these lists of things? Mailing, filing, shredding. These can become backlog really, really quickly. And if you have one of your students go in to do something like that, then the staff at the company can focus on more challenging tasks. Is the work volume steady or growing? You know, there's some businesses that during certain parts of the year, they get really hit with a lot of work and they need help. A lot of placements happen during the holiday season because a lot of companies are looking for short-term employment. So if there might be a difference in need of staffing, and you will know when to go and talk to those businesses as those months come up. Do they use temporary agencies to hire? Temp workers are expensive and often perform routine tasks. And then student employees will reduce the cost to the business overall if you're able to get them in there.
Just a note on that, oftentimes they're paid, 75 cents, or the back end of the temporary employment agency gets 75 cents for every hour that they work in addition to what they contracted for pay. So when we say it can be expensive, it really can. So if you can find out if they have temp workers, and like he said, they generally do entry-level tasks for the most part, and so they can be replaced for a short period of time for the employer can save some money.
Yeah, and then the other big component too is when it comes to just job carving or job developing as a whole. I remember when I first started doing it, I was so nervous. I'm extremely introverted. When I'm on my own, I'm fairly quiet. Obviously, in this role, I can't do that. That's why you see me throwing my hands everywhere. It's my nervous way of handling that. But I was very nervous to go to local businesses to try and job develop, because what if I mess up? What if I ruin the potential relationship? What if I ruin a potential for a student? And again, I'm not just going there to represent a specific student or my school. I'm an advocate. We all are advocates for people with disabilities. And with that, there's a lot of pressure on that. So one of the things I started doing early on is I had the benefit of living about 30 plus miles away from my job. So I would start job developing locally where I lived to practice. I practiced the conversation. I practiced my opening lines. I practiced all these different things, and it made me a lot more confident for when I went into the area where I served my students to job develop for them. Okay. So, the other thing that was also very difficult for me was the limit in my own creativity. And that was that my approach wasn't a very positive one. My approach was, okay, how am I going to convince this person to hire this disabled person to work? Like, it's going to be a lot of work for them. They're going to have to jump through a lot of hoops to support them. It's going to be very time consuming. And I think that cost me more job carving potential than anything else. It was my own perspective. The second I shifted and started recognizing the huge amount of benefits that the employer has to hiring your students, it became a lot easier. And I'm not talking just the tax incentives. I'm talking about the other things we've mentioned earlier on. It's just helping and changing that perspective that goes a really, really long way. So rather than thinking of getting a placement, you're there to meet their company's personnel needs. And I would also encourage all of you to think about not just placing a student at this specific site, you're building a relationship. The coolest feeling ever is when you get a manager or a director calling you saying, hey, Even, do you have any more students you can send my way? Because it happens. So here's some questions you can ask to help plant the seed when meeting with an employer. What duties take staff away from their main functions or areas of expertise? Are there tasks many employees do not, employees do that could be performed more efficiently by one person? Which duties require staff to work overtime? Are there tasks that are backlogged or difficult for staff to get to? And then which duties put production behind schedule? Are there any duties which temporary employees are used to do? Which entry-level duties do not receive the necessary attention from current staff? And many other ones. The second you approach an employer with questions like this, they know you mean business. They know that you understand their needs, that you're there to help fill a gap that maybe they didn't even really recognize. So the benefit of this is that you get them to start thinking about this as something that can be resolved. There's times where employers are like, yeah, things are backlogged and that's just the way it is. And now you're providing them a solution. So understand employer perceptions by probing further for details. How many overtime hours occur per week? Is that a time and a 1.5? Use trial close questions. If we could reduce overtime costs, would that be of interest to you? If your sales staff could focus on customer contact and not be burdened with paperwork, would that benefit your firm? These are the different types of questions that, again, you're there to do business. You're there to, you have a product that's an awesome product that a lot of people don't know about. You're providing them a solution. And the best part of it for them, it's free. You going there and talking to them and engaging with them, that's costing them nothing. Otherwise, they would have to hire in specialists to come in to do probably across a month or two, a deep dive into how they function, what their procedures are, trying to make some changes that the staff doesn't fully buy into right off the bat. It becomes this really, really long-term process that's much more expensive. You already have the solution. So the trial closes with the job developer see if the employer sees the benefit of job carving. Positive responses should trigger movement to the next step. Negative responses, they might mean that you need to put further inquiry on hold for now and just wait. But that also gives you an opportunity to focus on more promising signs. But this is another really, really huge one. Making sure to follow up. This is again where that organization comes into place. As an instructor myself, I go on Pinterest and see what other teachers do, and then I shut my laptop and go cry in a corner because I'm nowhere near as organized, creative, or fun as a lot of the teachers can be. But so for those of you who are more inclined towards being organized, helping your team, helping your school, or even your district, and finding ways to be able to follow up is key. So if you have a site and they're telling you a no politely, hopefully, you can ask them, hey, is it okay if I follow up with you in a month? No, that's not okay. Well, what would be a good time for me to follow up with you? Whatever date they tell you, mark it down. Remember it, follow up, because you're still building a relationship. A lot of this is, I always think of it as dating in a lot of ways. And it's, you're trying to get that first date. And of course, you want to, you're very interested in the business and you want to make a long-term relationship, and maybe that's your goal, but you can't start off with that. You might scare them off. So taking the steps that are necessary to, meet them where they're at is going to be really, really helpful. So by knowing when to push further and back off is going to be really helpful in doing this, because again, it's a long-term relationship. Will you make mistakes? Absolutely. Even the best job developers still make mistakes constantly, especially in this crazy world where everything is changing. There's a lot of potential, but there's also a lot of battle between priorities. I can hear her right now. My wife is teaching from the other room. My mother-in-law is a K through 12 teacher. She had to go through both designing classes for Canvas and going to teach online. To do something extra was just so much effort, even though it was the right effort to do. So recognizing that the businesses are going through similar type of things can be beneficial to you to know when to approach them again. And if they see that you're understanding of it and you're not just always pushing, it only helps build a more positive relationship.
Another point on following up, sorry to interrupt you even, is sometimes you go in and you talk about what you can offer them, and maybe right off the bat, they're just, like Even said, maybe they're busy doing something and they're not really putting a lot of thought into it, or maybe right off the bat, they do not find interest in that. But after a little bit of time, maybe they talk to someone else and maybe they think about it. Maybe they do a Google and might find out that they might want to participate in this as they look into it more. So that's another reason to follow up, because their interest might change over time.
Great point. The other thing, once you have enough businesses that you're working with, hosting annual or semi-annual events where you get to really show the success of all the work you've done together, meaning you, as well as the companies that are included, definitely can help develop buy-in. I've led a few events where I've just brought in the business owners I've worked with, and business owners that were kind of cold feet, interested, but not really. I didn't have to do anything besides get them in the room. The businesses I've worked with in the past did all the work for me, and I was able to develop a lot more stronger connections because of it. So into the next thing is we're going to be talking about identifying different duties available for your students. This is a great list because I know, at least for me, when I started off, I was very limited by my own creativity. But once I started hearing more stories, more success stories, more stories where they weren't necessarily successful, but finding out what went wrong, it really helped. And being able to identify this list, I know now if I go into a business to look for some of these things. Are they happening? Are they behind on doing this? Identifying again those potential problems for them. So we'll move on to the next one. So identifying different duties. So as entry-level duties are identifying, you can ask the following questions. How often are they performed? When is it performed? What amount of time is usually devoted to getting that task done? Can you predict in the duty schedule how much time you need? Is speed and accuracy a factor in this? The other thing that's really important, at least for me, I have horrible memory. So what I've done for myself is I'll develop a standardized form of the types of questions I want to ask and types of things I'm looking for. Thankfully now I can just do it on my phone as I'm going through the store by myself, or through a business if I'm available to walk by myself, mark those things down. But I always kept a questionnaire available to me to remember the way I want the conversation to go, a script almost. I used to go in with a clipboard with that script attached, but that became very impersonal. So now what I would do is I would go in, I would try to communicate with the hiring manager, hopefully, and then run to my car and fill it out as quickly as I could before I forgot anything. By having a standardized form that you all use together, it's helpful to, again, track that information across the board and make sure that you're looking for similar things. And then, of course, adding your own personal notes as you visit. So you want to make sure that you're matching duties to your potential candidate. So you want to be trading duties between an open position and a current employee to maximize the talents of both individuals. For example, if you have a vacancy in a 2-person deli department, you might be restructured so that the new hired support employee performs more of the food prep activities for which they're better at. And then that allows the existing staff to spend more time serving the customers. Match the duty. Oh, sorry, I already read that. Fission. So dividing a single position into 2 or more jobs. For example, a position in the office might be redesigned so that a support employee performs routine functions, while a more experienced coworker focuses on complex job tasks. And then fusion, reassignment of similar functions from several employees to a newly created position. So rather than each department collating, stapling, folding, and mailing its own materials, a supporting employee could provide this service. One of the things, and I don't think this one is too rare, but if you have an employee who's good with consistent tasks, or I'm sorry, a student who's good with consistent tasks, having them go and work at several restaurants, folding in utensils into the napkins. It's a task that most staff at restaurants does not enjoy doing. And it's often enough not really a task that a restaurant will hire permanently. But if you're able to have that student do that task across a few different sites, it'll still give them the hours and exposure and ability to work with others that they need, as well as providing a really cool service. I've actually had a student in the past start their own little side business where they just do that. And a local chain of restaurants would hire them and they would just go from one restaurant to the other throughout the day to accomplish that task. So for the cut and paste, it's best when an opening already exists. Entry-level duties from the filed positions are traded for more advanced duties. Fission is when there's growth in the business, make it difficult for a single employee to perform all the duties previously assigned to the position. And then fusion is best when the type and amount of routine work currently distributed across employees could be pulled into one or more part or full-time positions. Now the last step. So it's important for you to document that describes how students can assist the business. So there's a lot of different ways to do that. You can talk about different work samples, different things that your students have done, how efficient they are, how productive they can be. And then, also providing hiring proposals. Now, the other thing when it comes to hiring your students, help them be set up for success even further by encouraging employers to accept, they're not even modifying hiring documents, but different forms of hiring documents. And what I mean by that is to try and have them be open to you sharing a video resume or record the student completing some tasks so that they can see what they're able to do. Pictures and videos of those things can be really helpful because truthfully, a lot of times we're battling when we go out to find our students a job is fear. A lot of the employers, a lot of the managers may not have experience working with a disabled population. It's new, it's different, it's a natural response for people to operate by being fearful. They're never going to say that. Most of the time, they're not going to say that. Let me put it that way. But if you're able to show them that they're people and that they have strengths and abilities and good days and bad days, just like anybody else, the buy-in starts coming in. The understanding starts coming in. So for best practices, I can't emphasize this enough. Student-centered planning. Talk with your students. Again, learn what their passions are. Understand where they might have some strengths. Look at what their perceived weaknesses are. I had a student who worked at a CVS, talked a lot, talked with everyone a lot. It became a problem. So we redirected him to start looking for jobs where he can be a tour guide, whether it's at a museum or something similar. And because that is going to be a place where his quote unquote weakness at one job is an awesome strength in another one. So develop ability to overcome employer objections to changing the way work is done. So again, this is where it's a big challenge and it's a big ask, and a relationship is required before you're truly able to do this. But have them start looking at it from a slightly different perspective. Look at the long game here. It's very rare that you go in and you say, hey, I have a student that can help, with this task over here. And the manager goes, awesome, they're hired, bring them in tomorrow. It takes a little bit longer. Plant the seed. Job carving methods really combine sales, marketing, and human services. It's difficult at times, but it's important that we remember this. We have an awesome thing for these businesses. Our students are amazing. And then helping by analyzing their workflow and identifying different job tasks that your students can do. Remembering to focus on the job matching. Not every student will fit for every job opening that you have. I can understand the urgency and the want sometimes to place a student in a position that you have open, but is it setting up either your relationship with the business or the student themselves for success if that happens? The cool thing is, once you have a strong relationship with a business, you can call them and say, hey, I have a student, I'm not 100% sure how they're going to work, but I see a lot of good potential. Are you okay with them working with you for a little while? Once you have that relationship, you can have those conversations. But prior to that, the job matching has to line up as much as possible.
Also on job matching, it's really important to take into consideration that this is sometimes the student's first entrance into the work world. So if you don't take certain things into account about matching the environment or the job task with their abilities and strengths, then they might fail and they might internalize that as something is wrong with them and not that they were in the right environment or that they were in the wrong environment or that they weren't supported enough. And if you have too many of those experiences or even one bad experience, it does make it more difficult and anxiety inducing to re-enter or try again. So you're not only trying to benefit the employer, but it's really important to take into consideration the socio-emotional effects of failing at a job or being put in a job that doesn't match your strengths or your passions. You might be bored by it. You might not be motivated to work, but it's not enough. You have to match more than just skills, and job matching is a really important element.
And thank you, Nicole. And also, I think most of us know this, that a lot of your students, you might be their only cheerleader. You might be their only person in their life who believes that they can hold a job. When I teach disabled students post K through 12, there's a lot of them who will say that the only people that believed in them were their teachers, that their parents at home say that they can't get a job, they can't hold a job, all these other things. So what Nicole says, it resonates so much, at least with me, because I remember back when I had my first job. I don't know how I kept that job, but my expectations, my experiences, my frustrations, all these other things were so fresh and new, and I had nothing to compare them to. So if I had, a negative work experience, I would 100% internalize it. So it's really, really important to serve as well as a support system for your student and checking in with them to see how things are going. Because again, that first experience is a big one. That's the one we almost all remember. So thank you, Nicole. The other thing, and I think in education, we do this quite a bit. We love our acronyms. We have so many acronyms, and it's not our fault. There's so many initiatives that come through the state. then the initiatives change their names, the new initiatives come out. But different things, even like DOR or regional center, these are going to be things that employers don't necessarily know. And it's hard. It's hard to remember to turn those off. Nicole actually isn't in California. Nicole, where are you?
I'm in New Hampshire,
So when
other
I
side
started,
of the country.
started talking about DOR and regional center and all these other things, I just get this head tilt from Nicole of like, we don't have those specific ones here. But when it comes to talking to businesses, they don't know, they might not even know what school you're representing. So it's important to try and remember not to use acronyms as much as possible. Same with any education-based jargon that you might have, which again is totally natural for the environment that you're in most of the time. But when you're going into businesses, you need to, if anything, learn their language and learn what words they utilize, and most importantly, what words they understand. And then be positive. Don't volunteer negative information about your student or the climate or anything like that. It's one of those things they teach in customer service, right? Don't ask a question that can have a potentially negative reaction to it. I learned very quickly not to ask, how's your day going at times, because that can just go off into a completely negative tangent. So it's just finding ways to engage with the employer that they leave thinking this was a very positive experience. Okay, so keeping these relationships. So, when you make a connection with a business, you shouldn't bring the student with you. And sometimes it's also good to go without having a student in mind. This reduces the pressure for them to hire right off the bat. You want to provide them only the needed information. They need to have the information that would help to best support the student at that site. Try to set a standard for evaluation and the type of feedback, both on-site and off-site. What I mean by that is try to talk with the employer if they would like to meet, if you can talk to them once a week, twice a week, once a month, after shifts, before shifts, but let them set the pace. If they prefer texting, great, phone call, in person. Again, we're put in this difficult position where we need to appease what their needs are when we're building this relationship. I forgot to click, sorry. And then following up, it's the same as when we go to interviews, or we tell our friends when it comes to interviews, make sure to check in, make sure to thank them for their time, finding ways to reach out to them and stay in their mind, at least in the background, and for them to remember that you exist. So again, if you have a student that is placed, making sure to follow up, following the same rules that most people in business do of trying to give a response back within 24 hours, different things like that. And then again, you might want to meet in person with them while they're working, but they might be really, really slammed during those times. So maybe a phone call or text might be much, much better.
Also, you want to make sure too that the employer has the information that they need to support the individual. If you have information about their particular disability or anything particular related to them that might help the employer understand or make the experience more supported on their side, that's always a good thing to do. You definitely don't want to drop in, leave a student, and then leave it alone, because if it's a bad or a not a great combination, you might be able to find something out in the beginning and fix it before the end of the engagement. If you're able to do that, then you might retain that relationship with that employer longer.
Thank you. And then, as mentioned before, everything we provide is research-based. These are all the different references and all the different research that Nicole has looked up and gone through. Yeah. Nicole, I don't know is there anything you want to add on this slide or no? I forget. No, okay. And then we do have one last tip, and that's really be kind to yourselves. It is crazy out there, and there's a lot of expectation and a lot of change. and that's difficult. And in order to be able to serve others, you got to make sure you serve yourself too. With that, if oh no, next slide. There we go. We wanted to open it up for any questions, or if anybody would like to share something that they have learned. So Nicole, you've been working the Q&A portion of it. How's
No
it
one's
looking?
Q'd or A'd, so I have nothing to report.
Okay.
I think there
Oh.
was one question in the question box about the career coach. If you could post the URL to career coach. They said that they searched and several different ones came up.
Yes.
And then I had another question that somebody said, do you have any tips on finding remote work experiences for students?
That's a wonderful question. I think one of the things that I find that a lot of people need is even meeting moderators, or if they're doing conferences and different things like that, having somebody who's able to mute chat and keep an eye on the participants, provide information during trainings, things like that has become a fairly big need. And at times people don't even recognize that it's a need. So any agency that has, that would typically have big weekly, bi-weekly meetings and sessions, that's one of the things that I've seen to be extremely helpful. Nicole, I don't know if you found anything in your research recently that speaks to that.
About what? I'm sorry.
Just remote work experiences. And like one thing for our division is we'd love to have students out working, but obviously we can't right now. And but just some tips on if you've heard anything at other districts about finding work placements for students remote.
Yeah, one of the things that I did hear was that because of the lack of opportunities and their presence sometimes still in the school, was that some schools were trying to develop work-based learning opportunities within the school, working with other individuals on the campus with the jobs that they do, maybe helping out in the front office or with the janitor, or something in the gym if you have a gym and there's stuff that needs to be taken care of behind the scenes. There are ways that you can develop these opportunities within your schools. As far as remote work, I did speak with one individual who developed his own remote work opportunity. He offered, I think, the first 100 hours, and it was all done remotely and virtually. We have heard a lot of success from APSE, the Association of Putting People First in Employment. And one of the things that they said about remote work was that it could also be an avenue for job coaching. Their clients seem to be really receptive to the access to the job coach through their phone or through a computer web-based conference. So they were able to do that kind of remote communication. So I think it's not too far off to think that they would do great in remote opportunities. But as far as specific ones, I don't have any to suggest. I'm sorry.
No, but I do think that we've asked our teachers this year and our other staff, our VTAs and navigators, to really think outside the box and to try to approach employers that previously, I couldn't think of the right word, previously offered in-person opportunities for our students and see, how some of those opportunities could pivot to remote. And while, of course, we're not seeing, anything close to the number of students that we had working in person when we could place them in communities, what we are finding is that a lot of the strategies that you shared today are the same strategies that our, staff used when contacting employers and talking about, specific student strengths and, how those students could assist employers. We have found that some of the employers had new needs that they never had before because of the current situation that they're in. So I would say, to all of our staff who've participated on this call, really, you can still use the same type of thoughts and process in supporting students and locating remote work. And, it's not going to be the same, obviously, as when we can and will one day place students back in community, based placements, but at the same time, it is kind of the same process and the same thought process and thoughtfulness that we'd want to put into the process if we are exploring remote work for them. There's a few more questions in the Q&A, so I'm going to mute myself and maybe hand it over to Nicole if you want to read them, if you can see them, or Anne if you want to read them off.
Yeah, sure, I can read them.
I also put in the chat the link to Career Coach. Let me share it just really quick from my screen. Can everybody see that okay? Okay, cool, thank you. The reason why I really like it is because it has a few simplified things. One is this assessment button, which allows you to do a 6-question assessment, which is doable, right? And then this nightmare of a 60-question assessment, which is a lot of information and a lot of time, but the 6-question one does a nice job. And then what it also does is you're able to look for different careers or different programs that your student might be interested in. The thing that I like the most about it is anybody who's helped anybody build a resume, it's a formatting nightmare. This has a really cool, simplistic way of building out resumes that are formatted nicely. It even suggests skills based on the job that you've had, as well as jobs you're looking to earn. And being in high school, there's not too many jobs that your students have had, but it allows for an opportunity for them to get familiar with the tool, as well as include skills that they have or volunteer experiences that they may have had up until this point.
So the next question is from Tammy. Do you have any tips on how to approach or interact with the bigger companies who tell us that they need to speak with corporate? It's really important before you even go to meet with the organization is to try to find out who is responsible for making hiring decisions or who has the ability to make big decisions before you even go in. Because it is true, a lot of these are bureaucratic hustles and you have to figure out who you need to talk to, and it's going to take more time if you work your way up. So try to contact corporate and say, are there anyone there at your office that I might be able to talk to regarding this opportunity at this location? Don't hesitate to go straight to the top. Angel asked, how would you recommend talking to employers about financial compensation for students? This is a tough one. I mean, it's going to depend employer by employer. You're going to have to do that whole dating analogy that Even talked about before, and really, have you set the groundwork to answer these questions or to approach these difficult topics of conversation? And if you have, then my only suggestion would be is to absolutely make sure that it's equal pay for equal work. And then Christina said, usually we do not disclose information on student disability. If there is a problem at the job site, how do we address that? Very clearly, you cannot, with the ADA, disclose on anybody's behalf. So it's about finding out what the problem is specifically, and then trying to solve it, pretending you know nothing about the person's individual disability. If you do that, then you can communicate with the employer as if they're just another person who needs help doing work, and these are the things that we can help them work best. If they're behavioral issues, there might be a little bit more of a challenge there, but it's just going to be a case-by-case basis. That's a complex question for sure.
It is, and there's a lot of different options for it. The other thing too is to talk to your student about disclosure and what that conversation looks like, and practicing that conversation. It's a nerve-wracking conversation to have. But talking about appropriate accommodations, different components like that, because the thing about it is they're going to be with you for a period of time, and then they're not, and they need to have the ability to know that they can advocate for themselves. So knowing that it's okay to have that conversation, if they feel comfortable to do it. Nobody's talking about twisting their arm to do it or anything along those lines, but also letting them know it's their option to share that information. And if they can also share what appropriate accommodations they need at a job. To me as an employer, I'm thinking, wow, this person just told me what they need. I know exactly what I need to do. I know what they need to work best. Whereas, you know, if you hire somebody who doesn't disclose a disability or somebody without a disability, you have that honeymoon phase for a few months, and then you start finding out what their real needs are. This you kind of get to jump ahead.
Also with disclosure, you want to take this nugget home with you. Research says that youth are less likely to disclose and more likely to struggle in their environments because they have had potentially the school advocate for their accommodations their entire life. And then they get into the workforce and they don't know how to ask. It's really important as part of your transition programs, and we're probably going to talk about this in a training coming up, is that you really focus on how, when, and what to expect with that conversation, because some employers are just downright uncomfortable having it. And the more confident your student is to talk about how they work best, then the better they will be for the employer.
Okay, so we have one more question, and then we need to close out. You mentioned you learned not to ask, how are you? Would you share a couple of good opening lines? One of the things is you can go in and compliment the environment that you're in. So their place of work. People take pride in where they work, and sometimes they don't always feel appreciated, or they don't feel like other people notice. So if you start working with specific businesses enough times, so like oil changing business, I can't think of the right name for those. But you start noticing the different things that people will go extra mile to make sure that is available to their customers or their employees, they'll go a long way. So just that would be my focus. It sounds weird saying it out loud, but I would almost go undercover to a business, like not wearing my badge, not being like dressed as a customer, to go scope it out, take my little notes. And then I would find a few of those things and say, wow, you guys are a well-oiled machine in this area, this area, this area, which is kind of funny to start off that way, because the next thing you're telling them is, you'd be even better if you have this, this, and this. So it's little things like that. But again, finding something where, you know, something that they've done or something that they've had a hand in or something that they're a part of, and you recognize it and you see it, they'll automatically put them in a better place. So with that, I want to say thank you to everyone for being here. We also have a survey we would love for you to fill out. Anne, is that okay? Yes, okay, I'm seeing head nods. If you have a phone, you can just aim your camera at the QR code, do it that way. And Nicole or I can, Nicole, do you mind putting it in the chat pretty please? Okay, she's gonna put it in the chat. And again, this is our contact information. If you have any additional questions, we get the wonderful privilege of seeing you a few more times. So we're both very excited for that. And if you have any questions in the meantime, or if you would like us to focus on a specific area a little bit more, please feel free to reach out and we'll try to fit it in.
Wonderful. Thank you guys for all being here. Thank you, Even and Nicole. I think it was really, really helpful. For all the attendees, notice in the chat box, Nicole posted their survey. And then I also posted, and I'll repost it here, the feedback survey for within our office as well. So I'll post those right now. So thank you all for being here, and we will see you next Thursday for work readiness with Grit and Flow.
Thanks, everybody. And thank you to the presenters, Nicole and Even. We really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And of course, you guys, the surveys are not mandatory, but they are very helpful for us in planning. So, you know, if you don't have any feedback, you don't need to fill it out. But if you do have anything you want us to consider, or if you want to tell us that it was super helpful, so we know that we're kind of going in the right direction, feel free to click on both of those survey links and let us know. So thank you for your time, and we will see you next week. I'm going to go ahead and hit the end button, which is going to turn this off for everyone. So thank you and take care.
Bye, everyone.